Next, let's take a look at some of the other things we can do with the adjustment brush. So go ahead and open up the image for this lesson if you want to follow along. And a quick note about workflow. I'll work through the basic panel. All right, that little basic tab over here. I'll work from top to bottom through this panel, and I'll get this done first. And then I'll go in and do any of my adjustment brush stuff or any of the graduated filter stuff that we took a look at. That's pretty much the order in which that I would do things. So start here first. Get things right. Get your exposure right. Get your temperature right. Get your white balance right. In this image here, I think it's a little bit warm, so I'm going to cool it down a little bit. And that looks better. Exposure, I'm going to bump it up a little bit, but honestly I can't because I have this really bright background, and that's what we're going to go use the adjustment brush for. So I'm about pretty much set here. I'm going to leave everything in the basic panel alone, and I'm going to go click on my adjustment brush. One of the first things that I would do here is let's kind of add some light to the faces a little bit here. So I'm going to double click the saturation slider and double click clarity, and instead increase my brightness a little bit here, and just take a brush and paint in on the faces and just see if we can bring those out just a little bit more. Alright, so that's looking pretty good. You can even go into the hair a little bit. It's almost just like adding a little bit of fill light on here. And as I look at it, it's kind of looking a little bit too warm to me again, so I might just take my temperature, just go back, and you can go back and forth. Just remember that letter K, that's the shortcut. Just hit the letter K. And that'll take you back and forth between the adjustment brush and that basic tab. Now, we can get some fine-tuned changes in here as well. So I'm going to take my zoom tool and just zoom in onto her eyes here. And you can use the adjustment brush to whiten the eyes. So in this case, we can take a really, really tiny brush. I'm going to hit the left bracket key and make my brush very tiny. And I'm going to turn on auto mask. Let's take the brightness back to 0 and just increase the exposure a little bit. And just paint onto the whites of the eyes. Okay. And if that's not enough, just come back over here. Increase the exposure a little bit. That's looking good. Come over to the other side, do the same thing. Alright, so that's looking good for the eyes. If they have a little bit of color in them, you can always take your saturation slider down, and it'll start to make them gray, so don't go down too far. But if you take it down a little bit, you could start to get some of those, any of those little red areas out of there as well. Now, we can come in here, I can click on New to add a new brush, and I can paint over the colored part of their eyes here, or her eyes, and instead of increasing the exposure, which I might want to do a little bit, I can come down here and I can increase the saturation as well. So we can kind of punch some more color back in there, and heck, you could come in here and you could change the color of the eyes. I'm not saying that I would because it looks funky, but you could. If you come in here and they have the right color eyes to start with, you could probably very easily change the color of somebody's eyes using the little color swatch down at the bottom there. Alright, so let's take a look here. Let's hit our preview before and after. So I think we've done some nice changes in here. If I were to maybe take this a little bit further, you could always come over onto the gentleman. You'd probably want to do the same thing on his eyes. You could use a very desaturated brush and maybe paint over his teeth a little bit just to brighten that area up. Just add some more white inside of there. So there's lots of different things that you can do with this brush. It's not really just about dodging and burning, which is what we did on the last image. You can get in here and you can do some pretty nice retouching things on your photos with that adjustment brush. Now, this photo does need one more thing, and I'm going to talk about that in the next video because it's another new feature inside of Camera Raw 5, so make sure you check that video out too.